So I'm going to introduce you to Courtney Napoles, the engineering director at Grammarly, who's going to be talking about transforming user experience through natural language processing and machine learning. So please, a round of applause.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you everyone for being here today. I'm an engineering director at Grammarly, like Matthew said. I lead teams of machine learning engineers, computational linguists, and researchers located around the globe who are developing communication assistance for our users that is customized and delivered at the right time to help them improve their communication. And all of this technology is powered by large language models in conjunction with natural language processing and machine learning techniques. So today, what I'm going to talk about is really how do we advance digital communication in the generative AI age using natural language processing and machine learning with large language models. We all know how powerful large language models are, and I will be describing the hybrid approach that we take to develop meaningful and impactful user experiences for everybody as they're communicating. And then finally, after this, we'll discuss scaling, how you can bring these technologies to users at scale while also being aware of the risks that come with, and the risks and the challenges that come with scaling. So for the past 2 years, there's been so much hype about large language models, and we all know how powerful they are. It's something that we see in our everyday lives, really impacting and affecting the way that we consume and process information. They're incredibly powerful for going through large amounts of textual data and drawing inferences in ways that AI wasn't able to do before. However, in spite of how powerful these tools are, they aren't always the right tool for the job. These methods, while they can create very powerful inferences, are sometimes overkill in situations where you don't need to have these massive inferences and consume large amounts of data. And this can introduce latency and quality issues that might not be appropriate and could actually negatively impact the user experience. And we compare this to using a sledgehammer both for demolishing a wall as well as cracking a nut. It's incredibly important to choose the right tools for the job. And this is where natural language processing and machine learning come into the picture. So at Grammarly, we advocate for a hybrid approach where we pay attention to the user problem and choose the right combination of tools in order to help our users address their communication tasks. Now, I mentioned before this hybrid approach, leveraging natural language processing and machine learning in addition to large language models. Natural language processing and traditional machine learning work very well in narrower tasks that have a clearly defined problem. They have higher accuracy and higher controllability than large language models, and they also don't require the same compute power that LLMs do, and therefore they can be much faster too. And so, as a result, we like to combine them with large language models, whereas large language models, on the other hand, will process large amounts of text to draw inferences, but this can also, like I mentioned, introduce more latency. And latency isn't always it's probably never a good thing, especially when you're a knowledge worker working on a communication task. This latency can interrupt your productivity and interrupt our users' workflow and actually lead to more complications and negatively impact their experience. So in Grammarly's case, we found that taking a hybrid approach and leveraging the strengths of natural language processing, traditional machine learning techniques, as well as large language models, is the most impactful way that we can have high quality, robust outcomes for our users, while also minimizing the risks of having latency, as well as hallucinations that might come with large language models. And I'll be getting into this in more detail. So in order for this hybrid approach to be effective, you must customize the technology. And there are a couple of different ways that I mean in order to customize it. One is thinking about the large language models that you're using. How can you customize this? You can use fine-tuning, few-shot approaches, and different ways to be able to customize the model, or the output of the model, without just using it out of the box. However, secondly, and potentially more importantly, is understanding the user problem that you're trying to solve and decomposing this into the different steps, and then developing a custom approach that's appropriate for the steps that are involved in this communication task. And so, one example of a communication task might be responding to an email. And there are a number of steps in this. First is even just seeing the email, recognizing, is this time sensitive? Should I open it up now? That's one aspect of it. The second one is then understanding what the goal of the email is. What's the action that is expected of you, the recipient, upon receiving this email? Next one is creating the message and the content that you want to respond to, drawing in any relevant information, and then finally reviewing it, making sure it has the right tone, making sure it's accomplishing what you intend, and then sending it. For all of these different steps, you could try to solve it just using large language models. However, that introduces risks of introducing hallucinations or taking a very long time or being very expensive. It could be very slow if you're making multiple calls to a large language model. And this is exactly the type of situation in which we advocate using a custom approach and decomposing it and looking at each individual step and choosing the right technology. And so to describe this in more detail, I'll be talking about one of our features at Grammarly. These are strategic suggestions. And strategic suggestions have the goal of helping users develop and create impactful messages. Miscommunication can be a huge drain at work. So with strategic suggestions, we want to help users identify what's the right information that they need to include in their writing. Is it presented in the right spot in their writing? Is the writing tailored towards the audience that it's intended for? And in this way, the communication can be received more effectively by their colleagues, and this improves productivity and reduces the chance of miscommunication. And so here we have this example where in this email, the Grammarly suggestion is prompting the user to describe the benefits of the demo call in more detail. In order to create this suggestion, we leverage large language models because we need to be able to understand the purpose of this communication, the context of the user, and surface the right type of feedback. And large language models do this incredibly well. However, this is just one part of the entire product. We can leverage the cutting edge models, like in this case GPT-4, to be able to explore the space and to prototype. But then the actual model that we put into production is going to be a fine-tuned, smaller model that'll be more efficient and is custom tailored for the specific use case that you see here. And then in order to, so this is all large language models. You might be wondering, where does the NLP and the machine learning come in? There are a few different ways. One is even when we are working with the large language models and developing prompts, we leverage NLP and machine learning to iterate through different variations of a prompt and evaluate the output to optimize the prompts that we are using to actually call the large language models. And then secondly, in the product, making the call to the large language model is just one step in the pipeline. The first step that we do is we analyze the text. So we would analyze the email that the user has with machine learning classifiers and natural language processing, and to identify, is a strategic suggestion necessary? Right? Is this a high-stakes writing? Is it something casual that's a throwaway where it doesn't really matter? And in this way, we can really narrow the amount of places that we show strategic suggestions, and this both minimizes the number of calls that we make to the large language model, and we improve the user experience by not providing them with distracting or irrelevant suggestions. And then once we make the call to the large language model and we get the output, then after that, we also post-process this data with natural language processing and machine learning. We can improve the quality of the output using natural language processing. For instance, what if the dialect that's returned is not what the user was writing in? If it's American English, but they were writing in Australian English, let's fix that. Let's make sure that the output is in the right dialect. Let's make sure that it's consistent with the rest of the writing. And then we can also identify if the rewrite returned is changing the meaning of the initial text, we'll actually just throw it out and not show it to the user. And these are all the ways in which we can leverage a hybrid approach to have more reliable output, more reliable suggestions for our users, while also minimizing the amount of time that it takes for them to get this suggestion. And so, all of us here have probably experienced or are well aware of how generative AI can change our daily work lives and how we communicate. It has massive potential, and we're just now scratching the surface of how this is going to impact our lives. It's hard to imagine what this is going to be like 5, 10, 15 years down the road. But for now, there's already great potential that's being demonstrated with generative AI. And so at Grammarly, with our proprietary approaches, our business customers have already reported that on average, using Grammarly saves each employee 19 days of work by increasing the efficiency of their communication and reducing miscommunication. We have a number of different testimonials as well as evidence pointing to this. And then in addition to that, when you think about generative AI, knowledge workers who are using generative AI have said that it has saved them on average about 44% of time. So they are able to work more efficiently. But on the other hand, more than half of them want additional instruction and guidance on how to use it effectively. And so at Grammarly, with our product, we're leveraging this hybrid approach to develop user experiences with generative AI that are targeted for their use cases and help them leverage it impactfully while also reducing the amount of confusion or uncertainty in whether or not they're being used correctly. And so, as we're developing these technologies, it's our collective responsibility to build AI products that deliver tangible, impactful results while minimizing the harm that they can cause. And this is one inherent aspect of scaling. It's a challenge of scaling these technologies to a large user base. With large language models, and NLP and machine learning, they can work very well to address our communication needs. But on the other hand, there are challenges in scaling them efficiently, as well as catching problems that might come with bias, and as well as like the ethical practices of collecting and storing and processing user data. And in order for the most people to benefit from your product, it has to scale. And scaling is twofold, but rooted in trust. So one of the first challenges of scaling is maintaining the user's trust that your product is going to work. You have reliable results that are delivered quickly. So it's something that they can effectively leverage in their workflows and know that it is providing high quality suggestions. On the other hand, scaling also introduces the risk of bias in the suggestions that it makes. And in order to address this, we also take a hybrid approach. First of all, it's incredibly important to have humans in the loop in developing and evaluating the data that goes into the models, as well as evaluating model output to identify, areas of bias or misinformation. However, we also take a hybrid approach to be able to mitigate and detect instances of bias. We have natural language processing and machine learning techniques in all of our product that is analyzing the output of all large language models to detect potentially offensive or biased results, and then additionally to then fix this. If we can't fix it, or if we're uncertain of how good that solution will be, we'll suppress it, because it's most important that we maintain user trust by not showing them this type of biased information. So at the end of the day, I hope that there are 3 things that you take away with you. One is finding the right tool for the job. Large language models are incredibly powerful and have seemingly limitless potential, but it's important not just to focus on the potential, but also on the limitations of what they're capable of. Secondly is taking a hybrid approach, like I mentioned before, to find the right combination of tools to have reliable, high quality, and efficient solutions. And then finally, to remember that scaling is twofold, but rooted in trust. And by keeping these top of mind, we're not only addressing the challenges in digital communication, but helping to pave the way for a much more customer-centric user experience and more effective communication. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Courtney. Really fascinating talk, and also very interesting to hear about how you're combining multiple AI tools behind the scenes. So the consumer won't necessarily realize it, but multiple tools to really get the results that you want. What we're going to do now is actually go to the audience for any questions, because we've got a little bit of time. So do the audience have any questions? We have a question right there.
Thank you. Josh Taylor from BSI. Really interesting presentation. I suppose the hybrid approach, does that extend to large language models? So do you use a variety of different models in that space depending on the task at hand?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and the answer is yes. Since ChatGPT came out a couple years ago, we always get questions. We commonly get questions from people saying, "Oh, is this all GPT? Is GPT powering Grammarly?" And the answer is much more complex because we are, for the last 15 years since the product has been around, we're constantly looking at the whole portfolio of technologies and finding the right tool for the job. And so this means that with large language models, we have in-house large language models that we've developed. We also leverage third-party large language models. It really depends on the complexity of the task, as well as other requirements for speed and cost. Great question.
Any other questions? Oh, I can see someone waving on the front row over there.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. My question is, we are talking a lot about AI, but specifically for Grammarly, the role of linguistic expert. How is important inside the company?
It's a great question. So I lead a team of dozens of computational and analytical linguists at Grammarly, and the linguists are involved in all aspects of the product development. First, just partnering very closely with our product managers and user experience team to identify the user problems that we have in communication and what the desired outcome should bring. So bringing in their expertise in these areas as far as, rhetoric and language and, just to kind of shape the desired solution. And then we have linguists who are involved in developing the AI solutions, whether, in partnering closely with machine learning engineers and researchers to develop the evaluation criteria, to actually do evaluation and an error analysis of our models, developing the training and the tuning data, as well as prompt engineering and developing prompts that are accomplishing the user goal. And it's really important in this case to pay attention to the subtleties of language when dealing with large language models, because in a lot of ways a large language model can feel like a horoscope or a crystal ball where the response might seem good on the surface when you first look at it. It's like, oh, this is perfect. But then once you dig into it, it actually might be too general and not really addressing the user problem. And this is where linguists come in to be able to identify and work through those subtleties of language.
So it really sounds like Grammarly have thought about the limitations of LLMs and complemented LLMs with other AI tools to really provide an optimum solution for customers. Is that how you would conclude it?
Completely. You said it better than I could.
There we go. Well, thank you so much, Courtney. That was a fantastic presentation, and hope the audience really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.